You ever get that feeling that some incredible scientific breakthroughs are just kind of stuck in the mud?
Oh, definitely.
Like the potential in biotech is just mind-blowing, but the way we actually get from discovery to, real-world impact feels, well, glacial.
Yeah, painfully slow sometimes.
What if we could just flip the script on how science gets funded and how scientists actually collaborate?
Well, that's pretty much the landscape we're diving into today. We're looking at bioprotocol.
Okay.
It's a platform proposing a really radical shift towards what they're calling decentralized science, or DeSci.
DeSci, right.
And for this, we're using bioprotocol's own documentation dated December 24th, 2024 as our guide.
Perfect. So our mission today is to really get under the hood of bioprotocol. We want to understand how they're trying to fix some of those major pain points in traditional biotech funding and getting things to market.
Exactly. What makes their approach different?
Yeah, and what's the potential upside? For anyone listening who's interested in supporting science,
Yeah.
maybe being part of that next wave of innovation.
Right.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture. What are the fundamental problems bioprotocol is actually trying to solve here?
Well, the documents point out some really significant hurdles. For starters, the sheer amount of time scientists spend just hunting for funding is staggering.
Staggering how?
They estimate it could be up to 80% of their time just on grant applications.
80%, seriously.
Yeah, think about that. That's like 4 out of 5 working days potentially not spent on the actual research itself.
Wow. That's like a Formula One engineer spending most of their time just polishing the car, not designing a faster engine.
Exactly. It's a huge drain.
So, with all that time sunk into fundraising, what's the real-world consequence? For progress, I mean.
Well, it heavily contributes to what people often call the valley of death.
The valley of death.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's where promising early-stage discoveries, the kind with real potential, often just fail. They don't make it to the market.
Why not?
They might look great in the lab, but they just lack the resources, the support to navigate that really long, really expensive journey to becoming an actual treatment or technology.
So these potentially life-changing ideas just wither away because they can't get that financial lifeline.
Pretty much, it's a huge bottleneck.
What other bottlenecks does the current system have?
The sources also mention a big geographical bias in funding.
Okay.
Investment tends to cluster in just a few established hubs.
Right, the usual suspects.
Yeah, and that unfortunately means a huge pool of talented scientists and, innovative ideas all around the globe can just get overlooked simply because of where they are.
That feels like leaving a ton of talent on the bench.
Yeah,
Like only looking for smart people in one postcode.
that's a good way to put it.
And then there's the whole world of intellectual property, right?
Yeah.
That's notoriously complicated.
Oh, absolutely. The way IP is often fragmented and the complex licensing agreements, it can really slow down collaboration. Well, it can become incredibly difficult for different research groups to build on each other's work, which, ultimately slows down the whole process of turning basic research into something that actually benefits people.
It's like everyone has a piece of the map, but the rules for sharing are so complex, nobody can piece the whole thing together.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And the documentation also mentioned something about misaligned incentives
Yeah.
with patient communities. What's that about?
Right. That basically refers to how the priorities of, say, traditional research institutions or funding bodies might not always perfectly match up with what the patient communities actually need most urgently.
Ah, I see.
So, the research direction might not always address the most pressing issues from a patient's point of view.
Okay, so we're looking at a system with some serious hurdles. Scientists buried in paperwork, great research dying on the vine, untapped global talent, IP tangles, and maybe even a disconnect with the people who need the breakthroughs. That's quite a list.
Sure it is.
Yeah. So how does bioprotocol actually aim to dismantle these barriers? What's their different path forward?
Well, their core strategy really revolves around decentralization.
Okay.
So instead of relying mainly on those traditional, often centralized funding bodies, bioprotocol wants to empower a much broader range of people.
Like who?
Patients, individual investors, science enthusiasts, basically anyone to directly invest in the biotech projects they think have the most potential.
Decentralized funding.
Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty fundamental shift in how science gets paid for.
It is.
And how does that tackle the resource limits and the high costs? Because biotech innovation is famously expensive.
They're focusing on capital efficiency, basically enabling the pooling of resources.
Pooling resources like
Well,
what?
it could involve sharing valuable patient data ethically, of course, across different projects, or aggregating capital from that wider investor base you mentioned, even coordinating research efforts more effectively.
Okay.
All of that could, significantly cut the overall cost of bringing new innovations to life.
That makes sense. Sort of like a scientific co-op sharing the load.
Yeah, something like that.
The documentation also mentions a diversified portfolio. How does that apply here?
Right, because investing in a single biotech venture can be, well, pretty risky.
Definitely. High risk, high reward, traditionally.
So BioProtocol aims to create bundles of different biotech projects. This diversification helps spread that risk across multiple initiatives.
Okay.
So the overall investment becomes potentially more stable than just backing one single high-stakes project.
Like investing in a basket of promising startups instead of just one.
Exactly, spreading the risk.
You mentioned earlier the problem of untapped global talent. How does BioProtocol plan to connect with researchers everywhere?
By building a global platform for both talent and capital.
Okay.
Their goal is to connect scientists, researchers, investors from anywhere in the world who are passionate about specific therapeutic areas or drug development, breaking down those geographical barriers.
So a brilliant researcher in, say, Brazil could potentially find funding just as easily as someone in Boston.
That's the vision, really democratizing access.
That is a powerful idea. Now, let's tackle that tricky IP issue again. How do they envision handling intellectual property more collaboratively?
They're proposing a model of shared IP ownership, represented by tokens.
Tokens. Explain that.
Think of these tokens as like digital keys. They unlock co-ownership in what they call biotech DAOs. These are decentralized autonomous organizations focused on specific projects.
Right. DAOs.
And also co-ownership in the actual scientific IP that those DAOs generate.
Tokenized IP. Wow, that's a fascinating concept.
It is, isn't it?
It sounds like it could bring more transparency and maybe make it easier for discoveries to be shared and built upon.
That's the hope. The documentation also mentions creating liquid markets for biotech assets that are traditionally very illiquid. What does that mean?
Right. Traditionally, investing in early-stage biotech means your money is locked up for ages, right? Hard to sell your stake.
Exactly, very illiquid. BioProtocol aims to make these markets more fluid by tokenizing the assets.
Okay.
These tokens could potentially be traded on secondary markets. That makes it easier for investors to get in and out of positions.
Which could attract a wider range of participants.
Potentially, yes. Makes it less of a long-term lock-in.
So it could make investing in early science more accessible, maybe less risky for more people. And finally, they talk about open access. What does that mean in their world?
In this context, open access means removing the traditional gatekeepers, both in funding and in the decision-making processes within scientific research.
Okay.
By decentralizing these processes, they're aiming for a more open, inclusive, collaborative environment where good ideas get traction based on merit, not just navigating institutional politics.
Okay, a pretty comprehensive set of solutions, all leaning into this idea of decentralization. Now, central to all this is the bio token itself. What's its fundamental role in the ecosystem?
So the bio token is basically the governance backbone of the whole bio protocol.
Governance backbone.
Yeah. Holding bio gives you voting rights on key decisions within the protocol. And this powers even extends to what they call meta-governance across all the different specialized bio-DOs on the platform.
So owning bio isn't just about potential financial value. It actually gives you a say in how the platform and its projects evolve.
Exactly. It's about participation.
What else does the bio token do?
Well, beyond governance, it gives holders privileged access, they call it whitelisted access, to early-stage funding rounds for new, promising bio-DOs.
Early access.
Yeah. And it can also grant access to the tokenized IP that these bio-DOs create. So bioholders get potential early exposure to potentially groundbreaking science.
Like getting a front row seat, maybe even a backstage pass to the future of biotech.
That's a good way to think about it.
The documents also talk about a curation process involving bioholders. How does the community pick which projects get support?
Right, bioholders play a really critical role here. They vet and select the bio-DOs that launch through the Bio Launchpad. They can vote on projects they think have strong scientific merit, potential impact, and the projects that get significant community backing receive enhanced support from the network.
Support like funding?
Funding, guidance, access to liquidity, yeah.
Yeah.
This whole selection process happens through what they call the bio launchpad.
So it's like a community-driven due diligence process. The collective wisdom helps pick the winners. Interesting. Then there's this idea of network bio-DOs. How does the bio token fit in there?
Okay, think of network bio-DOs as a kind of built-in diversification for people holding bio.
How does that work?
When new specialized bio-DOs launch successfully on the platform, they contribute a percentage of their initial token supply back to the bio protocol, sort of like a network fee.
Okay.
So the bio token effectively starts representing a diversified basket of tokens from all these different bio-DOs operating within the ecosystem.
Ah, so as the individual projects succeed.
That success can indirectly benefit the value and the health of the main bio token itself. It's a bit like holding shares in a parent company that owns a portfolio of exciting subsidiaries.
Right, so the ecosystem success potentially boosts the core token. And finally, let's touch on protocol-owned liquidity, or POL. How does the platform sustain itself, make revenue?
So Bio Protocol actively provides liquidity within its own ecosystem. It holds tokens from the various bio-DAOs and the IP tokens in its treasury.
And uses those to
create trading pools on decentralized exchanges. For example, pairing the Bio token with a newly launched bio-DAO's token.
Gotcha.
By providing this initial liquidity, the protocol earns a share of the trading fees generated in those pools.
So it helps new projects get liquid markets and earns revenue for the protocol itself.
Exactly. It helps bootstrap trading and provides a revenue stream to keep the Bio protocol running and developing.
Okay, that paints a clear picture of the Bio token's role. Now, the documentation also mentions some funding milestones Bio protocol already hit.
Yeah.
Can you give us a quick rundown of those rounds?
Sure. It was a mix of private and public fundraising. On the private side, they had a pre-seed round raising $0.9 million at about a $35 million valuation.
Okay.
Followed by a seed round bringing in $1.4 million at roughly a $69 million valuation.
And the public fundraising.
That happened through something called the Biogenesis auction. It had 3 phases.
Right.
Genesis Round 1 raised $6.2 million at an $85 million valuation. Round 2 was much bigger, $18.2 million at $142 million. And then Round 2.5 added another $3.5 million at a $219 million valuation.
So quite a bit of early financial backing there.
Definitely suggests significant early interest.
The documents also give a snapshot of key metrics as of December 24th, 2024. What are the important numbers we should know?
Okay, so as of that date, token name is BIO. It's an ERC20 token on Ethereum.
Standard stuff.
Yeah. The initial circulating supply when it hit Binance was about 1.3 billion BIO, which was around 39% of the total potential supply.
Okay.
Maximum and total token supply were both listed as 3.32 billion BIO, though they noted the max supply could potentially change via governance.
Dynamic supply. Interesting.
And the Binance launch pool, where users could earn BIO, that allocated just under 100 million BIO, 3% of the total. It started on December 24th, 2024.
Okay, good numerical context for that point in time. Let's zoom back out a bit. What's the core purpose, the mission statement of Bio Protocol? And what's the fundamental value they're trying to deliver?
Their stated mission is basically to speed up groundbreaking science by empowering individuals, not just institutions, to fund and commercialize biotech innovations.
Empowering individuals.
Yeah. And their core value proposition. It's about creating more dynamic markets and building these on-chain communities around early-stage science, providing a structured, incentivized framework for distributed R&D. The ultimate aim is to generate valuable scientific IP outside the conventional pharma industry structure.
So democratizing not just funding, but the whole process and the outcomes of research.
That seems to be the goal.
Now, the documentation also highlights some existing products and traction. What have they actually achieved so far? Any standouts?
Yeah, one key thing is the BioDAO Launchpad. They report 8 DAOs have gone through their initial program.
8 already?
Yeah, and collectively, they apparently achieved a market cap over $300 million. They specifically mention one recent launch that was 13 times oversubscribed, raising over $6.8 million.
Wow, 13x oversubscribed. That definitely suggests strong interest.
It does.
What other products or initiatives do they have?
They also offer acceleration and BioDAO tooling services, basically support for communities wanting to set up their own BioDAOs.
Like help with the tricky stuff.
Legal, governance.
Exactly. Legal, governance, branding, Web3 tools. Plus, they facilitate collaborations with platforms like Catalyst and Pump.Science for things like funding tokenized IP, experiments, even AI research agents.
AI agents, okay.
And impressively, they state over 7 $10 million has already been deployed directly into research through this, resulting in a tokenized IP portfolio currently valued at over $43 million.
Those are pretty compelling numbers. Real activity happening.
Seems so.
What about the money flow, the trading side of things? They set up a liquidity protocol funded initially through that biogenesis event we talked about.
Okay.
It currently holds over $50 million in total value locked TVL, mostly in BioDeo tokens and ETH, used to create those liquid trading pairs for DeSci projects.
50 million TVL.
Yeah, and they also mention a growing community, around 29,800 unique token holders in the ecosystem.
So they're not just launching projects, they're building the infrastructure and the community around them.
That seems to be the strategy for long-term success.
Let's dive a little deeper into the launchpad mechanics. Can you walk us through those 3 phases again?
Sure. Phase 1 is curation. This is where bio token holders review and vote on potential biodeos.
The community vetting part.
Right. And you can pledge bio to show strong support. Phase 2 is acceleration. That's the funding stage.
Raising the money.
Yep. Projects raise initial capital, often using things like auctions or bonding curves to set the price based on demand. Phase 3 is separation. Projects funded, now it launches into the open market. Bio protocol usually helps by providing initial liquidity, pairing the project's new token with bio on decentralized exchanges.
So it's a clear process. Community input, funding, then market launch with liquidity support. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's look at the bio token distribution itself. The docs break down the percentages. What are the key allocations we should note?
Okay, the biggest chunk, 21.2%, goes to the core team.
Right.
The community option public investors got 20.00%. Then there's a significant 15.00% for ecosystem incentives in the treasury.
Okay, treasury is important.
Private investors, that includes Molecule AG investors and the pre-seed seed folks, they collectively hold 13.60%. Community airdrops total 6.00%, spread over 3 events.
6% for airdrops.
Yep. Molecule AG, the initial creator, holds 5.00%, same as the Molecule Community Fund. Advisors get 4.7%. Ecosystem incentives for specific rewards, 4.00%. Binance Launch Pool was 3.00%, and liquidity and marketing get 2.50%.
And just to remind listeners, Molecule AG was key in starting BIO, right? Bringing that IP tokenization expertise.
Absolutely. That IP NFT framework is pretty central to their approach.
The documentation also laid out a roadmap. What were some key things they accomplished in 2024?
2024 looked like a busy year. They launched the bio protocol itself, did the first community airdrop in Q2.
Yep.
Q3 and Q4 saw all 3 rounds of that biogenesis auction completed. They also launched the second batch of biodeos, and their DeSci dashboard went live in Q4.
Anything else notable?
Oh, yeah, that quantum biology auction in Q4 that raised $6.8 million, that stood out.
Right. And what about looking ahead? What were the key milestones targeted for January 2025, according to this doc?
January 2025 looked packed. They were aiming for a major CEX listing a centralized exchange.
Big step.
Yeah. Introducing DeSci AI agents, the official bio token generation event, TGE, on Ethereum, plus expanding to Solana and Base blockchains.
Multi-chain presence.
Right. Launching liquidity pools for bio paired with BioDeo tokens. Launching something called Long COVID Labs, announcing new BioDeos, and another project called Curatopia.
Wow, that is an incredibly ambitious start to the year. What about February 2025?
February seemed focused on launching version 1 of the Bio Launchpad and its curation mechanism, specifically on EVM chains, and also getting the Launchpad v1 onto Solana.
So continued development expanding across different blockchains. Makes sense.
Clear expansion strategy.
The docs also mention commercial progress, partnerships. Who are some key collaborators they highlighted?
Well, the foundational partnership is with Molecule AG, using their IP NFT frameworks.
Right.
ResearchHub is another. They do decentralized peer review. The plan was to integrate that with the BioDeos. Also working with Pump Science, another decentralized research protocol.
Any traditional players involved?
Interestingly, yes. Pfizer Ventures backs VitaDeo, which is described as a significant bio-network BioDeo. So that potentially funnels talent and projects their way.
Pfizer Ventures, okay. That's notable.
And they've partnered with university labs, too. Newcastle University, Imperial College London, University of Copenhagen, specifically for tokenizing scientific IP coming out of those institutions.
Impressive affiliations. Suggest buy-in from both Web3 and traditional science circles.
Yeah, it seems to bridge both worlds a bit.
Okay, finally, for listeners who are intrigued, want to learn more, maybe get involved, Where can they find the bioprotocol community?
They're active across several platforms: Twitter, Telegram, Discord, YouTube, and also Farcaster.
So plenty of places to connect.
Yeah, those are the main channels to follow updates, join discussions, connect with the community.
Excellent. So let's try and wrap up this deep dive. Bioprotocol. It's a really ambitious platform, isn't it?
Definitely ambitious.
Trying to tackle some really persistent challenges and how we fund science, especially biotech, and how we get it to market.
Right, using decentralization, tokenization, community involvement as the core tools.
The whole strategy revolves around speeding up innovation, making it more efficient, by involving a global community more directly.
Precisely. It's proposing this new framework where a global collective can actually fund science and even co-own the resulting IP.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, could platforms like Bioprotocol truly usher in a new era? One where scientific discovery is driven more by a global community than just traditional institutions.
It's a provocative question. What would the long-term impact be on research speed, on patient access to new therapies?
Exactly. So for you listening, we really encourage you to explore this further. Check out the links we'll have in the show notes. Maybe join the Bioprotocol community on their platforms. Form your own perspective on whether this could be, a real game changer.